Ferrari is in trouble as they still haven't solved their bouncing issues. Sergio's stay at Red Bull is very suspicious after F1 boss's involvement, and Lando Norris is in a bad place after repeated racing mistakes. Do consider subscribing to the channel. Now let's get into the latest F1 news. Fred Vasseur says getting on top of the SF24's bouncing issues is key, as development gains are being erased by the drivers losing confidence in the car. Although Ferrari had the second fastest car on the grid in the early rounds of this season, they've scored just 93 points in the 6 races since Charles Leclerc's Monaco Grand Prix win. Outdeveloped by McLaren and Mercedes, McLaren has overhauled Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship as they've outscored them by 89 points, while Mercedes are closing in. It led to Ferrari accelerating their development schedule only for the team's Spanish Grand Prix upgrade to trigger porpoising with the car. However, even rolling back on some of those upgrades, most notably the floor, has not helped their cause, with the SF24 suffering high-speed bouncing that negatively impacts the car's pace. Such is the magnitude of the problem, one Mercedes have had to deal with. It hampers further development, as Vasseur admits, even if the team is able to find performance. If the bouncing it there affects the driver's confidence. We are convinced, and it's our view, that 1/10 can change completely the weekend, he told the media. It means that we are all pushing to bring parts. And you know that the correlation between what we are doing at the factory and the track, for one thing, is not an easy one. It was not easy for Mercedes, it is not easy for us, it is not easy for the teams from the beginning of the season. We're also on the edge of the development, Vasseur continued. We have the same regulations for 3 years, and we have a kind of a sum total of performance. It's more and more difficult to chase the last 1/10 of a second, and we are a bit more on the limit. We have to police ourselves from the fact that bouncing is key, because it's not just a matter of performance, but mainly a matter of confidence of the drivers. If you are gaining 1/10 due to downforce, and you are losing 3/10 by the confidence of the driver, or the consistency of the drivers at the end of the day, that balance is negative. The Frenchman revealed Ferrari are pushing like hell to bring new parts to the car to resolve the bouncing issue. To fix the bouncing is a step in performance. For sure we are pushing like hell to bring something. We'll do it as soon as possible, he said. The issue is that when bouncing is not under control, I think it's quite impossible to simulate the bouncing also, because you can see from session to session when the wind changes direction or whatever, that one thing can appear or disappear. We are all marginal. We are all really on the edge of this. You can't simulate this in the wind tunnel. We have some metrics to imagine if we'd be in a better shape or not. Formula One owners Liberty Media reportedly asked Red Bull to reconsider swapping Sergio Perez out of the team, having come under pressure for his drive. Red Bull team principal Christian Horner confirmed earlier this week that Perez would be continuing with the team to put any speculation surrounding his seat to rest, but a report has claimed the sport's commercial rights holders requested the reigning world champions keep him in his seat, given his enormous popularity in Mexico. The Mexico City Grand Prix has yet to take place this season, the event taking place at the Autódromo Hermanos Rodriguez from 25-27 October, where Perez enjoys an enormous home support. And a report from German publication F1 Insider has claimed that, alongside words from Helmut Marko suggesting a potential shuffling of the cards within the Red Bull teams for 2025, Liberty Media also looked to keep the status quo for now, given the huge implications for the Mexicans' home race later this season. The report said, what was leaked behind the scenes? Formula One rights holder Liberty Media asked Red Bull to reconsider Perez's dismissal. Without the popular hero Perez, they feared an extreme drop in revenue at the Mexican GP on 27 October. Red Bull confirmed earlier this week that Perez would be continuing in his seat as planned after the summer break, to put an end to speculation that he would be replaced after a difficult run of races. Horner, in an announcement to Red Bull personnel at their Milton Keynes base, said, Checo remains a Red Bull racing driver, despite all the speculation of late. We're looking forward to seeing him perform at circuits where he's done well before, after the summer break. Perez heads into the summer break in 7th place in the Drivers' Championship, 146 points behind teammate Max Verstappen as it stands. Martin Brundle believes Lando Norris seemed a little unhappy at Spa over the weekend, wondering if the team orders from Hungary were still a part of his thinking. Norris was ordered to move aside for longtime race leader Oscar Piastri in the closing stages in Budapest after a strategic call from McLaren went in his favor at the final stops. With the British driver admitting at Spa-Francorchamps days later, he's not felt too proud about the way he was seen to have kind of clouded over his teammates' maiden Grand Prix victory. Alongside that, Norris acknowledged it was such a stupid thing from his perspective to have not allowed Piastri back past immediately, given the McLaren drivers were free to race until the checkered flag. After a P5 finish in Belgium, former Formula One driver Brundle posited the theory that the events of the Hungaroring hadn't escaped his thoughts entirely over the weekend. Lando Norris appeared a little unhappy about something all weekend despite solid performances, and I wondered if the events of Budapest the weekend before were still playing on his mind, Brundle wrote in a column for Sky Sports. Norris had started fourth on Sunday, but lost 3 places at La Source after running wide, making it a second race in a row where he lost places at the start. McLaren team principal Andrea Stella believes those moments are marginal from Norris's perspective, but looking more widely, he will look at both drivers to see how they can both perform to the best of their abilities for the remainder of the season. These kinds of situations, they're always very marginal, Stella told media, including PlanetF1.com after the race. I think Lando got a little distracted from what was happening on the inside and ran out of track. It's marginal things like this, I think, requires little adjustments here and there. Certainly we work with Lando, like we work with Oscar, to try and see all the opportunities in which we can improve individually, but also collaborate better, to either be more prepared or to use better our abilities and talents. I think it doesn't necessarily change our attitude, but definitely gives us some elements to analyze as to how some of these missed opportunities manifest themselves. Like for Lando, for instance, he looks like there's statistically some opportunities that tend to happen in the early stages of the race, so we need to check whether this is for a reason or it's just random. But like any other athlete or any other driver, I think Lando himself will talk to the team. We like to think, what can I do better? To make sure we capitalize on the good work we are doing. I think he was in a good starting position still, but then once we lost the position at the start with this low deg and difficult overtaking, we definitely made our life difficult. Max Verstappen insists all is well between himself and Gianpiero Lambiase after clear-the-air talks at Spa, the driver saying after a short talk they are going for it again. Such was the tense exchanges between Verstappen and his race engineer Lambiase during the Hungarian Grand Prix. Red Bull team boss Christian Horner orchestrated a sit-down between them and also technical boss Pierre Vacha on the eve of the Belgian Grand Prix. Said to be a good discussion, Vacha was included in the conversation, as while Verstappen's ire was aimed at GP, a lot of it was based on the Dutchman's feelings that Red Bull's upgraded RB20 was not good enough. He was 5th that Sunday, and followed that up with a P4 at the Belgian Grand Prix, where a grid penalty meant he lost pole position and started P11. The Spa weekend was a much better one on track for Verstappen, with his RB20 almost 0.6 up on his nearest challenger, Charles Leclerc, in qualifying. Whether it was that or those Thursday's evening talks, the radio messages between the driver and his longtime race engineer were a lot calmer. Everything has been resolved, Verstappen told Viaplay. I'm not going to talk about that. It's very simple. You don't have to talk about it for a long time, and we're just going for it again. That's how it should be, and that's how it has always been, to be honest. A lot of things are also taken out of context. Verstappen and GP F1's old married couple, as Horner has previously called them, were on a better footing. The triple world champion cannot say the same of his Red Bull F1 car. 2 years ago, he won the Belgian Grand Prix from 14th on the grid, while this year he could only recover to 4th. That's largely because Red Bull's rivals, led by McLaren and Mercedes, have closed the gap on track. That's meant McLaren have also closed it in the Constructors' Championship, where they're just 42 points off the pace. Such is the challenge Red Bull now face. Verstappen says he hopes to still win a race here and there in the latter part of the season. We have to get better, because otherwise it will be a long season, that is my conclusion. That was very clear, he said. Everyone is going for it full throttle, and we are going to make the best of it until the end of the season. Hopefully, it will still offer enough opportunities to win a race here and there. Pressed on that he insisted Red Bull's advantage is not only completely gone, and we are now also behind. That is very clear. Now it is up to us to try to put it right again, but that is not easy. Other teams around us are performing very consistently and are simply doing well. So yes, hopefully there will be more chances for us to win. All races were educational. Some things you could have done better in hindsight, but hindsight is always easy. Every weekend is always a learning experience, but that is also typical of Formula One. You have to be realistic. I have always said there will come a time when the weather changes, and that has been going on for a few races now. Mercedes have revealed that the cars of Lewis Hamilton and George Russell were within 500 grams on weight at the start of the Belgian Grand Prix as an investigation into Russell's disqualification begins. Russell thought he had collected his third F1 victory in Sunday's Belgian Grand Prix, narrowly pipping Mercedes teammate Lewis Hamilton to the checkered flag. However, Russell's elation turned to heartbreak just hours later after he was excluded from the official results at Spa, with his car found to be 1.5 kilograms under the minimum weight limit during post-race scrutineering. That gave Hamilton a record-extending 105th career win and his second in 3 races, having ended his extended victory drought at Silverstone earlier this month. Toto Wolff, the Mercedes team boss, issued a statement after Russell's disqualification was made official, apologizing to the driver and admitting the team had clearly made a mistake. Appearing on Mercedes's post-race debrief show, trackside engineer director Andrew Shovlin revealed the team are still trying to understand exactly what happened. And he made it clear that the cars of Hamilton and Russell started the race the same weight after their cars were weighed after the qualifying session on Saturday afternoon. Shovlin said, "Obviously very disappointing and unfortunate, particularly after he had driven such a strong race to win from so far back. Right now we're trying to understand exactly what happened. A lot of that involves us getting the weights of all the different components. The car can lose quite a lot of weight during the race. You get tire wear, plank wear, brake wear, oil consumption. The driver themselves can lose a lot, and in this particular race, George lost quite a bit of weight. The cars started the race the same weight. Lewis and George were both weighed after qualifying. The cars were within 500 grams. George's was the only one that had the problem, and it's because things like the tire wear was much higher. It looks like we lost more material on the plank. We'll collect all that data, though, and look at how we can refine our processes because clearly we don't want that to happen in the future." Asked about the impact of Russell's car being underweight, he added, "In terms of pace at the start of the race, it's nil because George's car and Lewis's car start the race at the same weight. Obviously, as George's car was losing weight faster than Lewis's throughout the race, there is an associated gain with that, but you're into the hundredths of a second per lap. It will be very small because when you're talking about amounts like 1 or 2 kilos, they don't amount to a lot of lap time. But at the start of the race, the cars were the same weight. Russell's choice of a one-stop strategy and the absence of the usual cool-down lap at Spa to allow drivers to add weight by driving over pieces of discarded tire rubber have both been cited as key factors in his exclusion." Shovlin argued that Russell did not have as much to lose as teammate Hamilton, having been on course to finish 4th at best until his decision to commit to an alternative strategy. He said, "It was a decision that was taken by the strategy team. In Lewis's case, it was a fairly simple decision to make his pit stop because he was leading the race and he had Charles Leclerc behind. Leclerc was not within undercut range, but when he stopped on fresh rubber, he would have undercut us if we had not brought Lewis in. When you are leading a race and the car in P2 stops, it is completely normal that you make sure you cover that because that is how you hold track position, and he was one of the significant threats. George did not have as much to lose. Had we stopped George at about that same point as we did Lewis, he was forecast to finish somewhere around 5th or 6th place. Maybe he would have got 4th, but we were expecting him to be able to get Sergio Perez, but he was still in that same battle that he was in before with Max Verstappen and Lando Norris. If we stayed out longer, that was what would then put George in contention for a podium position. He was very helpfully telling us that the tires had stabilized. They did not feel like they were dropping, and he asked if we felt a one stop would be on the cards. Based on the wear we had seen in the earlier stops and in Lewis's middle stint, we could see that it was viable that you would be able to get to the end of the race with rubber. He obviously did a great job hanging on to them. It was not our plan on Sunday morning to do that strategy, but it was a good reaction by the strategy team and by George himself during the race to adapt to what we were seeing, the lower degradation, and capitalize on that. Sergio Perez remains a Red Bull driver because the team doesn't believe someone else from their pool will definitely do a better job, says Bernie Collins. Red Bull team boss Christian Horner put to rest speculation about Perez's future when, after a crunch meeting on Monday, he told the team that Perez remains a Red Bull driver. Checo remains a Red Bull racing driver, despite all the speculation of late, Horner said. We're looking forward to seeing him perform at circuits where he's done well before, after the summer break. The decision came despite Perez's ongoing struggles with the driver, scoring only 46 points in the 9 races since his last podium in China. In the last race before the decision, the Belgian GP, he dropped from 2nd on the grid to 7th at the checkered flag, 3 places behind Max Verstappen, even though he lined up 9 ahead of his teammate. It has Collins speculating as to why Red Bull made the call, with the former Aston Martin strategist saying she thinks the team didn't believe definitely that the likes of Daniel Ricciardo or Liam Lawson could be a better job. I'm surprised if that was the decision they were going to come to, it didn't even happen earlier, if they were going to get there, Collins said in the Sky Sports podcast. He obviously had a very, very strong qualifying in Spa, but it was right on a knife edge. He nearly went out at the end of Q2. So it was close to being either P15 or the P2 he ended up, so it was real close. That wasn't all done to Checo. So I think it's in many ways, they had to look at their championship and say, who could we put in that seat that is guaranteed to do a better job for the remaining 10 races? And I don't think, given everything that's gone on, a few races ago we were talking about was Ricciardo safe in that seat, and we've gone through this cycle of all of it. So I don't think they can look at the 2 in the junior team at the moment and say, definitely they are going to do a better job. And that, I think, is what's been the key point of this decision. And, there's still some infighting happening within the Red Bull team, and it's all just pawns in a chess match. But just because Perez will be in the car at the first race after the summer break, the Dutch Grand Prix, that doesn't mean he'll still be in come the season-ending race in Abu Dhabi. That's the opinion of Craig Slater, who said, "The one aspect I take issue with there is that he stays for the remainder of the season. As I was dealing with that news, I said he would be back again after the summer break. But yeah, I don't think it's an absolute given that he does complete the season. I think Christian Horner would like him to. I know you've worked closely with Checo, Bernie, and I'm a big fan of his, and I think he's great, and I want him to finish the season strongly as well. But I don't necessarily think it's out of the question that they might, if things don't pick up in these next races after the resumption, that the talk will swirl around again if the title is in the balance. It would have been a Helmut Marko decision this. It was a Christian Horner decision, and that might be significant. I think Marko is more of a tinkerer, man. He likes to move people around quite ruthlessly. But do we really gain so much? Daniel has not been really banging on the door hard. They don't, for whatever reason, want to promote Yuki Tsunoda, and Liam Lawson is a bit of an unknown quantity, so not straightforward what to do. But yeah, it's such a shame. We have to remember a lot of good drivers have really struggled to deal with. Is it the style of car that Max prefers, and that's where the development path has gone? So he's not really exceptional in that sense, Checo. He's got about 35% of the points that Max has. It's right to say if that persists with the scoring we've had, they won't win the Constructors' Championship. And senior figures in Red Bull have been saying to Christian Horner, look at this, can't ignore the facts. It's your decision ultimately. You know that you have got to take responsibility for this one way or another. And so far he's keeping Checo in his seat. Thanks for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.